our friends at VC Ultimate are proud to sponsor Double Overtime. VC proudly puts community over profit, focusing their support on initiatives that help promote inclusivity. As the first ever sponsor to back professional women's and non-binary Ultimate, VC puts its money where its mouth is when it comes to equitable action. VC also approaches product innovation intentionally to make more players feel like the Ultimate space is their own. Did you know that all VC core products are now 100% gender-free? If your team is in the market for uniforms or custom team gear, check out VCUltimate.com. Not only are they working to change the landscape of sport, VC's performance gear is the best on the field. Thanks to our sponsors of Double Overtime, VC Ultimate. Welcome into Double Overtime presented by VC Ultimate. It is our last episode of Season 2. It is our Mailbag episode. I am Jenna Weiner, joined by Sascha Vogel. Folks can't see it if you are watching on YouTube or listening via YouTube, but Sascha, you and I are in different spaces than we normally are. Why are you in a different space than you normally are?
They decided to work on my internet. So my internet is out at my house.
Fun. And I am in a new location. Again, folks can't see. But my partner and I have just moved to a different part of the East Bay than we were before. So now I'm in my new place, in my new spot in the East Bay area, which I'm very excited about. And we literally moved like over the weekend. So the usual thing, Sascha, I'm sure you're well aware, as everyone else who has ever moved, that you end up with boxes all over the place. And things are just kind of all over the place for a while. So it's a little bit of a makeshift setup, but we're making it work. So yeah, I'm excited to do the mailbag and finish off Season 2. It's wild that we're through one season entirely now.
Yeah, and as we finish our season, club season's starting. So we're kind of going from one to another. I have my first tournament this weekend in Peachtree City, which is about 30 minutes south of Atlanta, for Club Terminus. And it's going to be fun. I'm excited. I haven't played a tournament in a very long time, so I'm kind of scared. Don't know if my body's going to hold up very well, but we'll see, I guess.
I'm sure they'll be just fine. Yeah, Revolution is happening here in the Bay. That's the primary big mixed tournament that happens every year here in the Bay Area. I will not be playing this weekend. I have some family event stuff going on. One of my grandfathers is turning 90, which is kind of a big deal, apparently, when a grandparent turns 90. So having a bit of a family reunion this weekend. And I'll also be keeping an eye on Pro Elite. They've split it finally for once into PEC West, PEC East. And pretty good slate of teams at PEC West. It'll be interesting to see some of those top squads in action early on. We'll see how deep of a squad different teams bring, because I know that certainly in some of the other early club tournaments, it's been a little bit like, oh, Pony loses to RDU in the men's division. Is RDU better than Ring? Is RDU going to win nationals? Which may be a little early for that on the men's club side. There's been some other similar results in other divisions, but that's the one that came to top of mind for me. But yeah, club season, working on club primer stuff for Ultiworld. So got lots of things as we wrap up our WPL coverage. And thanks to everyone who sent questions. And we got questions from all over, Sascha, and quite a few too.
Something we didn't get questions for was the Detroit Mechanix. So
see, Sascha, I was really hoping that I could just be like mailbag, and then we could just skim over doing the Mechanix Minute, but alas.
Yeah, the streak did not die. The streak is now at 70 games.
Boo.
The Mechanix falling to the Thunderbirds 15-25. So it wasn't a particularly close game.
It was kind of close at moments, I feel like.
The second quarter was definitely the best quarter. Because first quarter, the Mechanix go down by 4 in the first, but in the second quarter, Pittsburgh and Detroit went back and forth, and it ended up as a 6-6 quarter. And then the rest of the way, the Thunderbirds just kind of said, no, you're not going to do anything. You're not coming back. And so that is the story of that game.
It would have been funny, though.
It would have been amazing. So the Ringer of the guys got out of getting matching Detroit Mechanix tattoos.
Probably good for them to get out of that. And Sascha, you know how the last couple of weeks we were like, hey, Mechanix, you should hug him more. Hey, you should hug him more. Looking at the stats, didn't work out so well for them against Thunderbirds, which, okay, maybe they shouldn't listen to our advice about what they should do on the field.
Yeah, they only went like 4 of 11 on hucks, which...
Not great.
Not great. Kind of pushed them down in the huck completion percentage standings for this season. But I feel like a lot of the hucks were in the second half of the game, them trying to come back. So you got to do that in order to make the points go quickly and, get back into the game.
Yeah, makes sense for me. So, well, the streak continues, 70. Well, what's the next milestone? 75, 100?
75, I think is a good one.
How many more games are left in this season?
There are 4 games left, so they can only get to 74.
Well, they can start the new season with a 75th loss, potentially. Or not. We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, they've got the Madison Radicals up this coming weekend. Madison is traveling to Detroit for that game. So, Madison's not having a particularly great season either. They only have 1 win on the season. So maybe we'll see. Actually, I think the only win on the season is against the Mechanix, if I'm not mistaken.
Hey, Mechanix, you have a chance to even up the head-to-head at least.
Oh, no. They haven't played the Mechanix this year. Never mind.
Who'd they beat?
There we go. Maybe they beat...
If you can find it easily.
They beat the Thunderbirds.
No chance. RIP Mechanix. I mean, and wouldn't it be disappointing anyway if the streak died at 70 instead of 69? Like, it's just got to continue to make it not feel as
it's not the
heartbreaking.
Same.
Not the same. That's our Mechanix Minute. Given that this is our last episode of Double Overtime, presented by VC Ultimate of the season, TBD on exactly how you're going to be getting your Mechanix Minute. Odds are good that either Deep Look will cover it, or Deep Look will have Sascha and I jump on to record a 3 to 5 minute segment each week for the next 4 weeks to talk about the mechanics. So TBD, but the bet will be upheld. The Mechanix Minute will be fulfilled until at least the season is over. So not too much longer, at least. All right, mailbag time. Should we get into it?
Mailbag.
Sascha, would you like to reach into the mailbag and pull a question out?
Reaching deep into the mailbag. This mailbags always remind me of like Blue's Clues or Bear in the Big Blue House, where they it's mail time,
Or like Dora the Explorer. Didn't they have like a song for every like item or every like character?
Yeah.
You're the one who has small children, not me. So I will trust your judgment on this one.
It's Although they don't really do a bunch of like mail time stuff in today's kids shows. It was more of our generation type thing.
That's fair.
Anyways, let's go. I like this is probably my favorite question.
Okay.
And we kind of talked about it last season in one of our subscriber only segments. And this question comes from Ben Sadis, who we had on the show, who was a help with the stats for the WL. He asked, pick an expansion city for each league. So here we go.
Should I start? You start.
You can go ahead. Go for it. Take it.
All right, I will go first, starting out west, where I'm based, the Western Ultimate League. And I'm going to go with something that has been talked about, feels like for a while, something that I know we even talked about, like when I was on the board of directors back in 2021. That was a time when the Portland Swifts, if I remember even the name right, RIP that team before Orgononics became a thing. That wouldn't it be nice to have another team close to Seattle. Vancouver has always been looked at as a potential great option. It's close to Seattle. It has a great ultimate scene, especially on the women's side. You have Traffic, you have UBC with a great pool of talent, and that gives you another team up in that vicinity where teams can travel and play double headers if they need to. Or honestly, this would be a bit much, but some sort of triple header between Oregon and Seattle and Vancouver. Hey, I mean, if Milwaukee can play 2 games in one day, like a triple header, you never know. But still, certainly the pairing of Vancouver and Seattle is very appealing in terms of travel. And also, again, the scene's very good. So Vancouver will be my WL pick. How about you, Sascha? POL. Or WL and then POL.
Yeah, for the WL, I'd say I agree. Like there's a lot of space out west. So it's like it covers a very large area, and I don't really see any other place to put a team, I guess, except for maybe another California team.
I mean, the Bay Area could have 2 teams. Like it could feasibly support 2 teams. The problem is, given Frisbee culture, unless you had a very specific way to distribute the talent, then it would almost inevitably be that players would group to one team and one team would draw the bulk of the talent, the top talent in the Bay, right. And then you'd have a second team in the Bay. But yeah, I agree. Other than Canada, you could put 2 in the Bay, but other than that, like major population centers, we have them mostly covered for the Western Ultimate League.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess you could argue something like I don't know, either a Montana or an Idaho team, but they're just, the communities aren't super, super big in either of those areas. So, and that's kind of where Salt Lake draws from too. So I don't know. The WL's covers a large area with not as many people.
Yeah, outside of, again, California. But again, you'd have to do things differently in order to have a situation like you have for like baseball, for example. At the moment, at least, you have the A's and the Giants, or the NFL for a long time, Niners and Raiders, etc. And again, similar in LA, but it would be tough not to have sort of an A team, B team, unless you had very specific ways that the teams were structured to not incentivize that.
Right. So, okay. So going over to the PUL on the East Coast, I think it's pretty, I guess the most obvious answer has got to be Toronto or some
or
form
Montreal.
of Canadian team. Yeah, Montreal. I would probably Toronto, to be honest, just because we've got a club team there already with the Sixers. I mean, I guess I couldn't tell you where everybody is from in the Sixers, but I feel like most of the team is from the Toronto area. And yeah, I feel like that's like the most obvious answer over here. Like we could possibly see a team in, I don't know, Kansas City.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think that's doable. But then again, you draw talent away from other teams that pull from Kansas City. Because I feel like I remember Robin saying that there were some Kansas City folks for strike. I know that Indy Red pulls from Kansas City. I think Nashville also pulls from Kansas City. Well. So it's a thing, right? If we think about both major media markets and major sources of ultimate talent, it's a little tough to find both unless you double up on teams, right? Could you have two teams in Seattle? Yes, same problem as the Bay. Could you have two teams in like that, or multiple more, even more teams in that Northeast corridor, right? There's a Portland, Maine team. There's a New York team. Could you have an actual Boston team? Yes, but unless you have different incentive structures or ways to set it up, players are going to be drawn to the one team that is the strongest. And unless you have salary cap rules or something else, it's going to be tough to not have those super teams create basically B teams or secondary teams in their area. So then another thought would be like Florida. But again, in terms of like a strong, good media markets, not so sure about how strong the women's ultimate scene is down there. Florida State, Florida Fuel have been good college programs for a long time. But it's still maybe a little dicey.
What is that? Oh, the name escapes me right now.
Tabby Rosa?
Tabby Rosa, exactly.
Yeah.
Tabby Rosa, who, they've been a nationals contending team.
They've been at nationals a couple times. And again, they pull from that like Florida Fuel program. And also some of those folks have ended up playing with Seoul. So again, where are you pulling from? Also, given the current political state of Florida, I don't know how much it would align with the PWell's social justice mission. Words are tough sometimes, folks. But those, right. And I think, again, those are the couple of thoughts. You could try and go further west. Then
another
you run
Texas
into,
team.
Again, another Texas team. But then you start running into, again, more travel issues or doubling up on teams in different places. But again, that's not uncommon when we look to other major sports. Again, thinking the men's professional sports that have more teams in the US at least, quite a bit of doubling up. Or you're in major media markets that don't have a lot of ultimate. Again, we've seen more teams in Vegas with the Golden Knights in the NHL and the Raiders and maybe the A's, TBD. But there's not a ton of ultimate in Vegas. There's some, but there's just not quite the necessary scene that you would have to have to support a team. I don't think at this point. Cool. That was a long answer. Thank you, Ben, for the question. I'm going to reach into Mailbag again and pull out a question. I'm going to go to one from one of our Ulti-World writers, contributors, Alex Rubin. What needs to go right for Raleigh to win the PUL, Sascha? What needs to go right for Radiance to win the PUL?
Well, I guess win.
What just happened? They already did.
Exactly whatever they did. Whatever they literally just did. To be fair, Alex did send us these questions before the championship weekend. So.
Yeah. Alex was Johnny on the spot, and so got questions in before we got all the way to the end of the PUL season. So I just thought that was funny in hindsight. So we'll pull out another question, which I feel like it might be appropriate given that the U24s are currently happening. From Ruben, who do you think are MVP finalists in both leagues or a merged league in 2028? 5 years from now. Sascha, any thoughts?
5 years from now?
5 years from now. Who might be the MVPs? So the WL MVP this time around was Kayla Helton. I don't think we have an official PUL MVP. Honestly, it might be pretty tough too, given that your number one seed lost in semis, and then one of the teams that made the final was the wild card, and the other team that won the whole thing didn't necessarily play super well during the season, and then you have an undefeated team that also lost in semis.
5 years is difficult because a lot can change in 5 years. We've seen people play for a year and retire at 22 years old, and but we've also seen people come out at 30 plus and play an incredible season as well. So it's it's tough. Definitely like one of the younger players from each league. And this is a really tough one.
I mean, I can give my answers.
Yeah. You go first and I'll think about it for a second.
I had some initial, I was trying to jot down some initial thoughts when we were putting this mailbag together, putting all the letters together into the bag. And my initial thoughts immediately went, especially with U24s happening, to the two most recent Callahan winners in the D1 women's division, Abby Hecko and Dawn Colton. Both are playing U24s. Both have played for their respective WL and PUL teams, Hecko for Seattle and Colton for Radiant at one point or another. And even though Abby is moving east and going to be living in New York and playing with Bent, hey, it could be a merged league at that point. But two young stars who are already some of the best in the club division. I mean, Abby Hecko made like second team All-American for mixed last year. Like, these kids are good, and I think in 5 years' time, I think their preeminence in the sport, in their divisions, leagues, is going to continue to be a very much a thing.
So my initial thought now is like Erica Birdsong.
That's a good shout.
Yeah.
Who's also been very good this year.
It's been very good this year. Still a young player, only getting better as she gets more experience. So yeah, that's my initial thought. Just Erica Birdsong.
Yeah. I feel like you could almost pick like any of the UNC players who played with Radiance this year. I mean, Alex Barnett, oh my God, just wrecking people. Callahan finalist, Pody this year. Teresa Yu. Yeah, Birdsong, Colton, just any of those folks. So, but yeah, I think we both, leaned younger, looking at the current or recent college players as potential options. Cool, Sasha, you want to reach into the mailbag, pick another question?
Let's go with, from Kelsey Hayden, what was your favorite game to watch in each league this season? So I think we have to say, not that it wasn't exciting, but we have to, double overtime game LA Utah was one of the more exciting games of the season for sure.
I mean, it had everything. It had comebacks, it had big leads, it had spectacular plays, it had just like incredible, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. All sorts of different stuff. And then, yeah, the final and the back and forth final point where it was both teams clearly exhausted and finally just getting it done because your Miller going deep. Yeah, I think that's a good one. I think also just keeping in the overtime theme in the PUL. Maybe this is a bit of a cop-out answer, but Minnesota, New York established Minnesota as a credible threat when they were able to beat one of the best in the East Division. And then we ended up getting the rematch later in the season, went the other way. But I think that was also, and maybe potential controversy, travel call, who knows, right? Overtime game though. And you can't really complain when you get those types of games and matchups. Right. So thank you, Kelsey, for that question. All right. Moving along, Leah Smith asked, who are the best commentators in the league? This is tough because there's a lot of different commentators in a lot of different places. Sasha, I think you and I are a little biased given that we have both commentated games in these leagues. And so I think the easy answer is the two of us, even though we've never commentated together, let alone met in person. Folks, we have never met in person still. It will eventually happen, maybe. But yeah, Sasha, do you have any other thoughts on best commentators?
I think Leah was fishing for a compliment here in this one.
Leah commentating for Utah at one point or another.
Yeah, do you guys say I really enjoyed all of the Utah commentators. I can't remember exactly who all was commentating every time for Utah. There's a few, but I think they all did a pretty good job. And also shout out Zigno Zag in Seattle. He's always been one of my favorite commentators to listen to.
Yeah, also shout out Charlie Lowe, who's done a good job on the indie broadcasts. Would also appreciate a little shout out. It's also tough sometimes because we don't necessarily always catch all of the games. Sometimes we tune in and it's just like voices without necessarily introduction. So shout out to all the commentators because the job is more difficult than it would seem on face value. Sascha, you're up for the next question out of the mailbag.
From Laura Osterland, all PUL versus all WL, who would win? And I think we are agreed here that the all PUL probably would win this game.
Yeah, I'm a little bit could go one way or the other. If we're talking like all PUL in terms of like top 7, maybe top 14, I think all PUL beats out all WL simply because A, there's more of a pool to draw from, and B, because you have more of those like world games kind of takeover types of players that you have distributed across some of the top PUL teams. Like I know when Deep Look has talked about this, and I feel like we've talked about it on occasion, like the top end of the PUL is very good, and then there's a big drop off to the rest of the league basically. And so if you're able to pull all PUL, you get to select the best of, from all those different teams, and especially from those top teams, right? Because like all PUL, I'm thinking Cartagena, Mosquero, Trope, Normile. I could get Schaffner. I could get Mex. I could get Robin. Like, I haven't touched Carolina like at all. So that's a pretty top line. I think if we were to say like an all-star team of PUL folks versus an all-star team of WL folks, then I think it starts to lean in the WL's direction because I think there's more depth of talent in the WL in terms of getting past those first like top players. I think the WL can roll maybe a more balanced team if we go 25 deep or 30 deep instead of going 7 or 14 deep. Sascha, thoughts on that?
I think I agree. Yeah. I think it's like, I feel like the depth of the WL is better, but the top end of the PUL is better, like you were saying. Because I'm looking at like, just real quick, you were talking about World Games. Looking at a World Games roster of the US, there are, we have Schaffner and Cami Groom and Claire Trope and Carolyn Normile and Sarah Mexstroth, all with the PUL.
PUL, yeah.
And Kayla Helton being the lone WL player of the entire of this team. So like,
right, like just that tells you that there's more possibility there for the top of the PUL than maybe the WL. But again, like we've seen with Seattle, for example, like you start rolling teams deep, players deep, and all of a sudden it's like WL has quite a bit more depth of talent potentially if we were to form a full-on team. Which, speaking of, should we do another basically all whatever team versus another all whatever team? This one's from Keith. All-star team from the pros versus best players not on a team. What is the score of that game / who wins?
Let's think about this. All-star team from the pros versus best players not on a team. So we have to think that like 99% of Fury doesn't play in
not this year.
WL.
Not this year, at least.
Yeah.
Which, again, if we look at the World Games, it's Finney, it's Mad Dog, aka Anna Nazarov. It's, Claire Desmond recently played on World Games. Opie.
like
etc.
yeah.
Also, no Claire Chastain this time around.
Yeah, and I'm thinking like was it like 97, 96, 6 or 7% of Molly Brown doesn't play as well. And so there's your Claire Chastain and
your Cardenases,
the Cardenases, and yeah, there's so I think that I think the non-pros end up winning that game.
Yeah, and specifically
because we all
go ahead.
Sorry, we can also go with like the Canadian players as well who don't play.
Yeah, real nice to have Madison Ong, Mika Karahashi again balling out right now. U24s for Team Canada, played great for UBC in the college season. Yeah. The Sixers players,
Brady Dos Santos, and Alyssa Mason. Like, there's a lot of players, like crazy good players that don't play pro, and so I think, I think that the non-pros end up winning this game.
Yeah, and there was a specific ask of what's the score of that game, because I know in Discord there was a conversation. People were throwing around lines of like 4, 5, 7 in the favor of the non-pros. I put a potential scoreline of like 18-15, which is maybe a little bit closer than you might think of just like on talent, on paper talent. There we go. But that's also sort of an adjustment of folks who have played in these different leagues with these rules versus those who have not. Also, are we playing 7-second stall or 10-second stall? That might make a difference. What's the field size? That might make a little bit of a difference if we're playing 70 versus 80. So some of those types of things I think could make the score maybe a little bit closer. For the folks who are more familiar with the different pro systems and styles. But I think talent-wise, it's pretty heavily leaning in the non-pro direction. Like, okay, as mentioned, a number of those top players from the World Games playing in the PUL, I think, again, the depth of talent wins out if we're putting together an actual all-star team of non-pro players.
Right. Yeah, I like that question, though.
It's a great question.
Okay, so next question we're going to pull out is a question that everybody asks every single time. We talk about it throughout the entire season. We talk about it in the off season, preseason, everything. Will there be a PUL-WL merger in the next 10 years, assuming both can sort out finances? This is from @Austin Caterl. Sorry if I messed up that, Austin, on Twitter. I think yes. I don't see why not, really. Within the next 10 years, like why not?
I mean, the thing is, for me, I think my answer that I put in the doc was yes with a question mark, simply because 10 years is a long time. But I also think, for me, part of the question is, what would a merger look like if or when it does happen? Is it a pure like merger in terms of like the leagues like adopt a different name or adopt one of the names, but it's like more even? Or is it a situation where like the Western Ultimate League buys out the PUL, right? The WL buys out the PUL or vice versa, in which case then all the PUL stuff gets absorbed one way or the WL stuff gets absorbed the other way in terms of rule set and all that. I think that feels a little bit more likely if, again, only history has shown us that there tends to be one league that tends to win out financially, and then end up sort of bringing in the others. Like we had the NBA and the ABA, and the ABA got subsumed under the NBA, and same with the NFL and such. So I think merger is definitely possible. Again, 10 years is a long time. That's we're getting into the 2030s at that point. We got plenty of time. At that point, if we were to get to it, then the PUL has been around for 15 years, which is quite a fair number of years. That's for sure.
Yeah, and like you were saying with names, if let's say the WL ends up buying the PUL, they're gonna have to change their name.
Yeah,
of course, not the Western Ultimate League anymore. So I feel like it's either going to be, if there's a merger, it's going to be the Premier Ultimate League, or it's just going to have a completely different name.
Yeah, makes sense to me. All right, we got still some questions left. We won't get to have this going on for forever long. Per usual, we're recording late, so can't keep Sasha up absolutely all night. How about this one from Hello Goodbye in the Discord? How many games does Gridlock win out of 3 games against Brute? This one's really interesting because I feel like there's a fair amount of overlap between the rosters of these two teams. But my initial answer is probably 1. Again, rule sets matter. Are we playing in the PWOL rule set, which is not that different from USAU, but a little bit different? Are we playing under USAU rules? And the usual thing of, do we get to clone players or not? Is it the Gridlock roster as it is now, and Brute plays with what's left, or vice versa? I think generally at the club level it tends to be a little bit stronger, and Gridlock has Cartagena and Mosquera. So all to say, I think I went with 1, but I feel like a line of like over under 1.5 feels about right.
I think Brute ends up winning it. I guess the 2 out of 3. I feel like it's gonna go, like, if we would do like a series best of 3, it would go to game 3, obviously. Like, it would go Gridlock gets 1, Brute gets 1, and then Brute would get the other one or something like that.
Yeah. And let's be honest here. Gridlock this season, pending rosters, pending availability. Gridlock in the POL this season lost to Philly, lost to Minnesota, lost to Raleigh. I think Brute is a better team than at least 1, if not 2 of those teams, if not all 3. And given that's the case, then I think there's a real chance that Brute takes 2 of 3 at least. I think Gridlock gets 1. If only, Cartagena, Mosquera, Genie de Jesus, and company, and Tulsa Douglas and etc. Have enough to play, to beat against themselves. Certainly for Tulsa and the Brute Squad folks who doubled up with Gridlock. All right, back to you, Sasha.
Okay. This question is from Liege Merrill. I hope I said your first name correct. How many Wild players chose not to play Sunday games, and does their record improve a game or 2 if the WL schedules them Fridays, Saturdays, like the ADL does with the Shred? Honestly, I think there was only 1, maybe 2 players that chose not to play Sundays, so I don't think that they would improve by a full game or 2, to be honest.
Yeah, I also think that there's at least one weekend where it was the doubleheader in Oregon and Seattle where Utah played Friday, Saturday. So like that doesn't count against them. So yeah, and I also think like, okay, maybe you give them a win, right? Let's say theoretically it earns them another win because of reasons. That still puts them second in the Northwest Conference this year, and that doesn't change the eventual outcome where they lose in semis to Super Bloom. So it might earn them an extra win. It doesn't, I don't think, change the outcome of the overall course of the season.
Right. And it's like, the one player, excuse me, the one player that comes to mind is Kaylee Caldwell doesn't play on Sundays. And like Kaylee is very like incredible, very, very good player, but she's not like a game breaker, if that makes sense.
Makes sense to me. Yeah.
And so I don't like, yeah, she'll contribute and help a bit, but I don't think would be enough to put them over the top with another win.
Yeah. And like what losses did Utah have this season? It was to Seattle. It was to Oregon, right? Because they lost both of those games on the road. Close, right? In overtime. But again, those games were Friday, Saturday. What Sunday games they had? They lost by 1 to Seattle in Utah on a Sunday. They beat LA in that double overtime game on a Sunday. And those were their only Sunday games. So they beat Seattle instead of losing to Seattle. I guess that could flip the eventual result.
Yeah, I guess you could say it's a coin flip because both of those games were by 1 point.
Yeah, both could have gone either way. So, I don't think it necessarily earns them a full win, and also I don't think it changes the overall structure of how the season probably ends up going.
Right.
All right, a few more questions from folks. Again, appreciate everyone sending in all of the different questions. We'll do another one from Hello Goodbye from Discord. Will Cammy Groom ever play in a PUL final? Well, let's be real. You could say that for the entire Shadow roster. Will they ever play in a PUL final? I think the answer is yes. I think the Shadow are good enough to make it to a PUL final at some point. Cammy Groom included.
Yeah, there's not much more to say.
I like how it picks out specifically Cammy Groom. It's like the entire Shadow roster still hasn't played in a PUL final. Like, let's be real.
Well, wasn't Cammy on Radiance last year? Am I wrong in saying that?
Definitely played Phoenix in club. But it wasn't part of the argument was for Cammy getting added late was that she had played for Shadow before, therefore it was fine.
I guess. It's hard to keep up with rosters like that all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know how these sports people do it with like NBA teams and stuff too. Like how do you know this?
They have more data.
That's true too.
All right.
Okay. Another question from Alex Rubin. What happens first, a PUL-WL merger or a team other than Seattle wins the WL? We both agree on this, a non-Seattle team winning the WL.
Yeah. San Diego didn't lose by much this year in very windy conditions. I think on a different day, San Diego could beat Seattle, especially if this San Diego team got the chance to play this Seattle team at home in San Diego versus having to play on the road in Seattle. Home field advantage is generally a real thing in sports, and that can make the difference when the game is decided by 1 or 2 goals in the case of Ultimate. And again, PUL-WL merger might happen, but if we're like kind of hesitant about happening in the next 10 years, yeah, somebody other than Seattle is going to win the WL in the next 10 years. So I certainly hope so. Speaking of title winning teams, this is a kind of follow-up question from Ben Sadis. Who will be the first non-Seattle or San Diego team to win a WL championship and the first non-Eastern / North Carolina team to win a PUL championship? Which, notably, this rolls out a lot of different teams, especially on the PUL side, because you're eliminating an entire division and then some. But my thoughts are Minnesota in the PUL, because they went undefeated this season, and I'm going to pick a team that has high likelihood to win their division, at least as they're currently constructed. And I'm going to be a blatant homer in the WL and say that if it's not San Diego and it's not Seattle, it's going to be San Francisco. Sasha, you're going to do the same thing, but the blatant homerism the other way.
Yeah.
You got to, at least for this one.
Got to do it. So for the WL, Utah. If it's not Seattle or San Francisco, gonna be Utah
or San Diego is what the initial question was.
San Diego. My bad. For the PUL, that eliminates a lot of teams.
A lot of teams. 5
no Raleigh,
teams.
No, yeah, no Raleigh, no Philly, New York, Shadow, or Portland.
Funny thing is too, if you it's written down in our document as first non-Eastern Division / NC team, which my mind is already thinking a club, and I'm thinking NC
North
stands
Central.
for North Central, which rules out Minnesota and Milwaukee. So, well, then we're really out of luck, and then I'd probably go like Austin or something. But gosh, then we're getting rid of half the league.
Right. Yeah, I think I agree that Minnesota is probably the next best one, because they looked really good this year, and if they can just continue to grow off of that, and then I think they got it. My second team after that is Austin.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel it. All right. Couple more.
Yeah. From Edward Stevens. Shout out E-Money. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important was end of quarter clock management to Raleigh's wins?
This being the wins in the POL championship weekend.
Right. I don't know on a scale, but clock management is super important. I mean, we've had multiple
many
rants
soapboxes
on this subject over the course of the season and last season on clock management and end of quarter situations. And so like it's very important no matter what. So yeah, I guess probably an 8, I would say. Like it's you have to like, because like some okay.
Well, and just in like these close games, I gave it on initial thought, I gave it a 7, because in these close games, it matters whether or not you are the team with the disc at the end of the quarter. And if you are good about ensuring that you have the disc and the other team doesn't, that can be up to a 2-point swing. And in the game that finishes like by 2, then that's going to matter quite a bit. It's not the be all end all, but it's certainly very, very helpful.
Yeah, and like why are you not going to take a free break? You know, right. Like you're finished. Okay, if you're not really following, when you have the disc at the end of the quarter and then you receive the disc right afterwards in the next quarter, you don't have to play defense to try to get the disc back.
Mm-hmm.
And, we all know defense is really hard in this game. So you hold the disc, you score at the end of the quarter, and then you automatically get it back. It's like a safety in football, Yeah,
something almost like that. Well, as again, if there's situations where a team cannot possess the disc at the end of a quarter, they turn it over, they lose their opportunity to score. So that's 1 potential point in their direction lost. And then if you go score, well, now it's a 1 point in your direction that you've gained. And again, 2-point swing, basically. So we've seen it time and again, really important. And in really close games, can make a really, really big difference. And finally, a little bit amusing. This is inspired by a Reddit AUDL question, apparently. Question being, who would win Radiance versus Pride, Columbus Pride, if Pride played with 8 people? So here's the interesting thing. Those two teams played 7v7 earlier in the season, and it was a pretty close game. But importantly, was Raleigh at full strength? Maybe not. So if we take full strength Raleigh versus the winless Columbus Pride from the season, if you add another player for Columbus, how does that go?
Raleigh still wins.
I think so. And here's my thought. I watched too much College Ultimate this season where UNC just picked apart zones, and so many of those same players are playing for Radiance. Again, Birdsong, Barnett, you, etc. And it's like, if that's the case, you put another person on the field, they're just going to rip through that zone anyway. You can double somebody up. Alex Barnett effectively got doubled up when they went box and 1 on her, and UNC still did fine. So like the Radiance would be fine if there was an extra person. I think the hardest thing would be when Pride goes on offense, but all it takes is one Radiance break and it could be curtains. So
right. And I know when I was in college, we definitely had practices where we would, trying to break a zone with an extra player on the field. And I feel like most good college programs do that. Be like, oh, there's an extra player on the field. Make sure we're watching out for that to make smart decisions. You know,
you play 5v6, you play 3v4.
Yeah, like it's so I don't think it would sway them at all, to be honest.
All right, Sascha, any other last mailbag questions that you want to pull out before we wrap on season 2?
last one from Alex Rubin. What is the best stadium/game day setup in the PUL/WL right now? It's kind of hard. I mean, especially trying to judge game day because I only was able to go to one PUL game and I've not been to a WL game, so I don't know like how.
And same vice versa. So I went to 3 WL games this year and no PUL games.
Yeah, not sure how the game day is for all the teams. Stadium, honestly, Seattle probably has the best deal.
Under the Space Needle.
Yeah, that's pretty legit. So I would say like best stadium, got to go to Seattle.
Yeah, I think Seattle is definitely up there. I think it's also tough because it's like best game day / stadium setup. And it's like part of it too. People will watch these games, again, both of us predominantly remotely. And so you mostly see it via the streaming, and the streaming setups can be so different. It can feel like a very different experience. Like I know that trying to watch some of the Austin games, it's like, oh, they're like these posts in the way, and that's really annoying. But then you talk to people who go to the games, and it's like, it's great. There's the side hill, there's like this whole setup, and it's really like great viewing. So it's a little bit tough. I'm partial to San Francisco's setup, but that's because I was in the commentary booth the whole time, so I was nice and comfy up there. So can't really complain. So I think they'll do it for our mailbag. Thanks everyone for sending in those questions. That will wrap us for season 2 of Double Overtime presented by VC Ultimate. It, once again, has been an absolute joy talking about the WL and the PUL with y'all this season, and Sascha to once again be your co-host. Folks, we're going to take a break for a bit until there is more exciting breaking news, etc. So keep an eye on your feeds. You never know when there might be an emergency podcast, a big move, an expansion announced or something. And otherwise, Sascha, we have made it to the end of season 2, the end of the 2023 PULWL seasons. Incredible.
We did it. Thanks for joining us, everybody. It was a lot of fun. And I mean, next season can only get better.
Only up from here. I've been Jenna Weiner. He's been Sascha Vogel. Thank you once again for joining us for season 2 of Double Overtime presented by VC Ultimate. Bye.